You know, someone asked me the other day what my opinion was of the MCU as a whole. Not what individual shows are like, but like what is my opinion of the whole entity, the behemoth, the 13, 14 years that it's been running. So, you know, obviously for everyone, I'm sure listening will know
about a
this,
couple of films here,
but like Marvel Cinematic Universe,
your Iron Man.
yeah. So obviously
your
this is when Marvel Studios kicked off its own production of films. You know, this wasn't like Sony producing Spider-Man or Fox doing X-Men. You know, Marvel started making their own films. Started with Iron Man in 2008, and then it has led to where we are now. And it is obviously like it's completely reshaped the industry, reshaped the way people think about cinema attendance. For better or worse, it's had a huge influence. And so therefore, for better or worse, with this massive thing that's just changed our culture, what's your take on it?
Yeah,
No pressure.
Going from it as a whole, I definitely remember in the beginning when the first film started to come out, and there were hints that they were building to a larger. It wasn't really obvious from the get-go that these films were connected.
No,
especially if you weren't really paying attention, you weren't super in. So I remember watching The Hulk, which was the second or third film.
Yeah, it's second.
And they had an end credit scene where Tony Stark came in and was like, I'm building together a team. And I remember seeing like, oh, that's cute, but they'll never do it. Like
really?
They won't actually do, even though they obviously like had intention, and then a few years later they would come out to release the Avengers. I still didn't think it was actually a thing that was possible. I thought it was a fun little Easter egg that all of these films were linked. And I remember seeing the Avengers and being like, oh, this is just nuts.
Yeah.
But what's interesting as well is they didn't have their A-list characters. Iron Man, which now is like the biggest comic book character ever, was serious like B, C tier IP that Marvel had. And then from that, it's just built. And for a very long time, there's so many different things to talk about within that. For a very long time, I was really like not anti the MCU, because a lot of people were a bit bored of seeing the films like 2 or 3 times a year come out. I was like, no, I think what they're doing is really special, and I was quite happy to defend it for a really long time. And I was always leading up to the Endgame Infinity War saga, and I was like, this is special, and I'm glad I've paid attention. Some of the films are definitely better than others, but I'm so glad to have been on the ride from my teen years into my young adult years. So I've always really enjoyed it.
I think I'm on a similar point of view to you. There's definitely good and bad, and I always try to be very evenly balanced, because people get crazy about these films.
People have opinions on them.
No, but like they either really hate them or they really love them, and I'm just like, well, it's easy to be evenly balanced. I actually think the whole of the first of Marvel Phase 1 is kind of like we talked about plane movies. They are just like
Phase 1.
They're not. Yeah, Phase 1 is not doing anything different with superhero films other than linking them together. Like Iron Man 1 caught people's attention, which was nice because it wasn't anything we're familiar with before.
It was sharp, witty, and the dialogue was really good.
But 2 months later, they released Incredible Hulk, which was like your basic. It was such a basic cliched superhero film that audiences I think were so tired of by that point.
Hulk's a hard one to get right.
Because as soon as he turns green, the interest is over, which is what Ang Lee tried to fix when he did it with the Jekyll and Hyde kind of
The Hulk
approach.
movies remind me of what the Venom movies are doing right now.
Right.
Not that you've seen them, but the way that like the marketing for Venom 2 is with 2 big monsters fighting each other. It's kind of similar.
There's something really retrograde about the Venom and the Morbius, films that came out from Sony. But that is also why I like the MCU, because I feel like audiences were so bored of seeing startup franchises like pushed on them that were isolated and disposable. Films felt very disposable. Everything was, okay, we're going to begin this and maybe we'll get you invested, and if we're lucky we'll get a sequel, if not then it'll peter out and then we'll relaunch something over here. And what Marvel had done had said, well, why don't actually we reward your attention for viewing? These films won't feel disposable because it's actually it's an episode in a much longer series, and the more time goes on, the more you'll be rewarded for sticking with it, and the more you can get away with because you'll create an expanded world.
And what's great is, as a format, comic books have done that for all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, they've always linked to each other and existed in the same universe and collaborated in each other's space.
I always think Marvel reinvented the blockbuster. And what I really think is like by the mid-noughties, the blockbuster was kind of like washed and worn out. Look what happened to the Spider-Man films. It's like they would have kept making those films until they were rubbish. And they did.
Do you remember how many times in the late noughties, how many people say, oh, cinema experience is dead. They're going to close down. There's no big screen event anymore.
Exactly.
And then, since then, all the top 10 highest grossing films of all time have come out and have been huge.
So I like the fact that the MCU was almost like taking into account we're not going to make these films disposable. We are going to actually engage and reward audiences in a different way.
Yeah.
So I really liked that. Also, I just thought it was. I'm inherently, and this is where maybe some people are different. I inherently find it quite thrilling when something from somebody else turns up as something else.
Yeah,
like when I remember I watched the
It's
incredible.
the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood meme where Leonardo's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I saw Incredible Hulk, which was this is a blast from the past, right? I watched the Incredible Hulk a year after it came out on a laptop, sharing an earphone in a mock exam hall in 2009, January 2009. Okay,
so why were you not doing an
okay?
exam?
I was people had finished, and some people were doing the exam. Everyone else was meant to be studying, so we were quietly watching the Incredible. So I watched it with one earpiece.
Such a thing, one earpiece.
I know,
share.
and you know, again, 'cause the idea that like
On a
the
plane,
film would
like
come out
that.
a year ago, and only now people sort of watch, and it was like pretty disposable rubbish.
Yeah.
But then the guy I was watching it with was like, "Oh yeah, you know, that's the thing from Iron Man," and I was like, "Oh, interesting."
You say they're bringing them
cross pollination.
and you start drawing out theories on the chalkboard.
Oh my goodness! And I found that inherently thrilling. I do think that the downsides with the MCU, when it got into like the mid phase, like in the middle of the last decade, is that they were so invested in building towards something bigger that actually films did start to feel really disposable again. That was my big problem with Age of Ultron, which was like they were like, oh my god, it's the Avengers again. And I was
threat,
like,
though.
Yeah, I was like, I know this is going to be isolated to one film, and I know you're bringing in Thanos later.
It's not a fun one now to go back and watch because there's not very much that matters from it.
Also, all those characters always get rebooted after that film.
Yeah.
So like Thor, if you watch Age of Ultron, is so straight and boring.
Yeah,
and now he's
really
so much more funny, and he's
chilled out.
Also, I keep saying also, but I think like a high point of respect for MCU is like Guardians of the Galaxy, because that's a film that had no cultural attachment.
Nothing.
Audiences were not ready for that.
The super nerds did, but even then it was.
It looked ridiculous. You had a talking tree and a raccoon and
very like space punk.
Yeah,
that's not for everyone.
Or and space punk, space camp, and the poster looked pretty, average.
Characters there shooting into
but
the lower
that
third.
I think that film is one of the most important films in the whole structure of the MCU, because people loved it. I did. So people really responded to it. And Marvel was like, people are following us now. People are willing to take the leap if we invest the time.
And it had such a different, unique tone and voice, and like the way that it was directed and the music that was put into it. It had licensed music, which is outside of AC/DC didn't really happen.
Yeah, and look at the if you look at the poster design as an example of the MCU after Guardians of the Galaxy, all those films are taking a much more cosmic, kind of like psychedelic direction. If the Thor Ragnarok poster where it's like the rings around, and Doctor Strange, they go, oh, I'm going to go, the kaleidoscopic visuals,
Space punk, rock and roll.
Yeah, and like Ant-Man going down sub-quantum, and they're really engaging with that. So
my main thing, like you talked about, things being disposable and sort of maybe feeling a bit tired. I really think that they could learn from letting some of their films breathe, and because they're a machine and they're making money, so they have every indicator from without a human looking at it says make more, keep making them. People are hungry for it. But there were so many times I thought, I don't want another film now after I've just seen that. Let this breathe, especially after Infinity War and Endgame. Even in the gap, I wish they hadn't done Spider-Man 2, Tom Holland Spider-Man 2 straight afterwards, because Endgame was such a full stop in a chapter that everything had built to, and I felt like you were just constantly shoving it down
was like,
my face.
I'm full.
I'm so full. I thought it was brilliant, and I'm so full. Let me think on that for a year, and then come back with something really exciting. To
also defend Marvel as well on something. I think people underestimate how hard it is once they'd started that train and all those different channels of films to keep that in check. And
one has to come before the next.
Yeah.
As they reference.
And when I watched Endgame, I rewatched it recently. I was like, actually, no, this film actually does really work. If you're not invested in this world, then don't bother. But actually, that film, to successfully conclude a series of like 22 films
with that many characters,
with a satisfying, emotional beats to it. Arc. I mean, obviously, like there's the whole nonsense, the fact that Tony Stark just invents time travel. Like, I get it.
Overnight.
I know, it's ridiculous. And in a little bracelet as well.
He's like, so I did it.
Yeah, I figured it out. But
he goes like this with some DNA, like twists it the right way and goes, oh.
But ultimately, Endgame is really satisfying, and it is so hard to achieve that. And that film also, I noticed with all Marvel, it's working really hard to give you a good time. Some more than others. I mean, like we felt Black Widow really miss, a bit much of a miss. But like Endgame, I think is working really hard to deliver on the beats.
3 hours as well. It doesn't waste your time in that at all.
But I mentioned that because with like when DC tried to catch up and they tried to build their own world and like Batman vs Superman, when people like slag off the MCU and stuff, I'm thinking, no, you don't know how. Look at the DC, what DC tried to do. That's when you do it badly. That's when you do it sloppily. You can tell that was messy, didn't have a strong direction, didn't really know what it was doing, trying to play catch up, trying to imitate something else. And by comparison, you can see the strengths of Marvel, which is like we have an idea, we have a plan, we know where we're going. I agree that like sometimes it's like, give me, I got enough Marvel. And I was definitely on with the thought of like, okay, you've had your hits, your misses. At the end of Endgame, we're calling it quits. I'm gonna move on with my life.
Yeah.
And then I watched all the Disney Plus shows, except for Falcon. I have CBA with that one.
Oh yeah, it's a bit. I was really excited for that for some reason. Then it was very dry. It wasn't interesting at all to me.
My thing with Falcon and Winter Soldier is the reason I'm not going to watch it is it's a superhero genre. I want to see people shooting laser beams out their hands. Okay,
yeah,
just give me that. I want people to see people be superhuman. I don't need to watch The Bourne Identity done by Marvel.
It's interesting what you were saying about the Infinity War Endgame culmination, which represented like a full stop to so many stories. I remember thinking going into that, A, excited for the movie, and B, curious of like, can they do it? I was really wondering, like, is it possible to actually make this work? And sure, they had like 2 movies in 5.5 hours to get it done. Yeah. That was like my main takeaway, is that, as you were saying, laying the tracks and clearly having thought about what Avengers 3 and 4 would look like and what are the 20 steps beforehand for us to get there. And that cannot be taken away. And there was a really cool moment where I think it was very exciting to be building up 2 or 3 films away from those last 2 Avengers films and look back at what they'd done. And it essentially made the most expensive TV show ever over 2 decades or 1.5 decades. And it was just quite fun to have done that, trying to think that everyone having theories. No, what's going to happen is but the stone is over there, and everyone having an idea of, and then time travel gets into it, and you're like, well, this just changes everything.
Well, we know from watching Game of Thrones that it's very easy to put off your payoff for something in the future.
Yeah.
So Game of Thrones would always promise
it
for the final series, and then when the final series came, they obviously buckled and they couldn't do anything with it.
What a shame if MCU had really like dropped the ball.
But it probably would have been more likely for them to have done that. Yeah. I went into watching this film thinking this is going to be a mess.
We were conditioned to expect it not to work.
But people also underestimate how people's like visceral response to the film. So Endgame, that moment when they all come out the rings, right?
The toy box just gets tipped up on the bedroom floor.
And that is, I know most people I know who enjoyed those films and watched them had like a visceral reaction. You and I saw it together, and I was like jumping up and down in my seat,
like vibrating,
and I was like grabbing you. And I know people who cried. I know people who shed tears. And when Cap grabs the hammer as well. And the fact that can have a visceral reaction on you shows its hold.
It cares.
And also, you can't pull that off unless you've done it for 10 years.
Films have tried. Yeah, Rise of Skywalker tried that a little bit.
Yeah, they tried to draw on that, but that only works when Marvel have done what they've done, which is, at that point, had taken 11 years to get you invested. So when this, literally 5 minutes, that's all it is, turns up, it delivers.
It's
the punchline of the joke that they've been setting up all this time.
Rise of Skywalker did it twice. They did it, spoilers for Rise of Skywalker. They did it at the end when all the other ships that got the call turned up, and they did it again when all the Jedi were standing behind Rey. Such a shame, that film. Yeah. Star Wars we could do another chat about the state of Star Wars another day.
I never thought I loved Star Wars when I was younger, and I never thought I'd get to the point where I was more interested in Marvel and what was happening with that than Star Wars.
I'd say like George and I probably, our early film bonding was over the hype cycle of The Force Awakens. It was that film coming out
That seems like such an
that
ancient
teaser
time
trailer.
ago.
Oh god, that was 2014, 2013?
2015.
2015 the film came out.
You're,
2014.
either I'm really good at dates or you're
No.
really bad at
Yes,
dates.
I know the film came out in December 2015.
Oh, but
remember
yes,
there
yes.
was a trailer
The
like
teaser
18
came out
months.
in December 2014.
It was
no, that was it.
the trailer or the teaser?
It was like November 2014. I remember.
It was over a year out.
The one where it was
That's that hype cycle. That was dangerous levels of hype for The Force Awakens. Even though it's not a perfect film, I think that film works.
Yeah, it still paid off though. But just one thing on Marvel as well. Like, so we've talked about its strengths. There are weaknesses. There are misses. You know, like I said, Black Widow.
Yeah. Thor 2.
Oh, Thor 2 is really ropey. Really ropey. Incredible Hulk. And some of them don't work as well. But then paying off what they've been building all this time, they can do things like Loki. Yeah. Which is really interesting. And they can do things like WandaVision. Like
them doing TV stuff makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Because they're not doing...
In the same way it makes sense for Star Wars with The Mandalorian.
I like it with their and I like with their TV shows, they've not just taken the structure of a film and broken it up and made it slower. They are going, no, this is going to be paced differently. It's going to be... We're going to have as much spectacle on certain thing. It's just going to be a different energy to it. And you turn up to the film for those experiences.
And also, I inherently don't think that Marvel treats its audience like idiots.
Yeah.
Like what Marvel is doing at the moment is basically saying, look, we're going to do the multiverse soon. And we know that means absolutely nothing to people. So we're going to break it down to you gently and get you established and familiar and open to the concept that there are multiple universities. Universities? You're going to Oxford. You're going to Cambridge. Multiple universes. Everyone's
Saul's like, Bath Uni?
I will take it.
Yeah.
But so you can't just dump that on an audience and say, oh, it's just set in like multiple different realms. You know, in the old days, in like 2003, they would have just like had one film where they probably would have set up the multiverse in like 20 minutes and then got off and done it. And they're like, no, you've got to put the time in.
Sow the seeds, let people grow into it. I think interesting looking back on it and what we were saying before about what the impact it's had on cinema, the blockbuster, everyone else's impression, like saying the reactions from other studios to try and replicate what they've done. And interesting hearing from some of the directors who probably look over the garden fence and see what Marvel are doing, how much money they're making, how much love and attention they get, and almost a bit like, yes, it is a bit of a. You can look at a year of films and go, well, 50% of the biggest films that are coming out are people wearing capes and superheroes. But when they are working like they are, I do have time for them. And like you were saying about people's hot take being just an impression of whatever the last one was. So I feel like a lot of the time MCU is only as good as the last hit they've come out with. So it could either be a really high or you can come out with something really, really bad. And it's like, I don't want all these Marvel movies. They're so bad now. They're so bad. And the really good one comes out. And they're like, it's so good. I'm so happy for it. So I've noticed people yo-yo a lot on it when it's a marathon, not a sprint.